Welcome into a very special edition of the Locked On Knicks podcast. Gavin Shaw, Alex Wolf, and the boys over from Knicks Film School, Jonathan Macri, Jeremy Cohen, join us to make some bold predictions about the season, including a potential all-star berth for two separate Knicks, an MVP run for Jalen Brunson. That's scalding. And will the Knicks lead the NBA in free throw rate? All that and more right now on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast. I want to thank you for making Locked On Knicks your first listen today and every day, because we are now available on all platforms. So if you want to join us in becoming an everydayer, you can do so by hitting subscribe and hitting that notifications bell on YouTube. And be sure to do the same on your favorite audio podcast platform of choice. And we also want to give you an option to take your relationship with us to the next level. You can do that by joining our Subtext. All you have to do is hit the link in the episode description, and then you will get basically double the amount of Knicks information for us. All of our thoughts after games, before games, on rumors, just general musings throughout the day, and you can respond with questions and thoughts about the Knicks or just kind of the nature of human existence. But if you want to talk to, who would you be talking to? That's a one philosophical question. I'm Gavin Shaw, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster. He's Alex Wolf, the editor-in-chief of The Strickland, the greatest Knicks website in the whole wide world. You can check them out on all forms of social media at thestrict.land. Without further ado, let's make some bold predictions as we're joined by the Knicks Film School crew right now on Locked On Knicks.
All right, it is the continuation of the Locked On Knicks Film School crossover, which I don't think we called it in the last episode, but here we use the clever names, baby. That's what we're calling it. So the Locked On Knicks Film School Bold Predictions yearly crossover rolls on right now on Locked On Knicks. Of course, if you haven't already and you didn't hear me plug this in the intro, make sure to check out the first part of this on the Knicks Film School side of things. Broke this into, I think, 4 parts in total. So this is your third of 4. And then there'll be another part where you can, hear even more of this. So keep your ears out for that when that's out as well. But for now, we're in part 3, and we're getting right into things here, Gavin. I don't think we should hold up. I'm just gonna jump. Well, you know what? Here, let's welcome our guests, I guess. For the people that didn't listen to the first part.
Yeah.
We'll be polite.
John Island, boys.
Yeah, first off, Jonathan Macri at Jase Macri NBA on Twitter. He is the writer of the Knicks Film School newsletter, the host of the Knicks Film School podcast. John, how are you?
I'm good, Alex. Thanks so much for asking.
Still wearing that same shirt, huh?
I'm never going to take it off.
That's, Tiger used to wear red on Sunday. John wears teal.
Exactly.
That's just how it goes. And then we've got Jeremy Cohen, the co-host of the Knicks Film School podcast, an occasional contributor to the Strickland. How are you, Jeremy?
Doing wonderful.
Doing wonderful.
Alex, yeah, I'm not wearing the same shirt as before. So, I mean, from the last episode, yes, but from all the other episodes,
I was going to be really impressed if you changed in the 5 minutes which we took between recordings.
It was another day. We recorded this on another day.
Right? I forgot.
It happens.
Everything is on separate days. We all just did laundry in between. That's how it went.
We're just big continuity fans. That's really all that.
But you already know who Gavin and I are, so I'm going to hop right into my prediction here. And so my second prediction of this show, I'm trying to decide which one I think is best to lead with. I'm going to save the spicy defense one for last. Ooh. And jump with my all-star one first. I feel like everybody's got to make at least one all-star type take in this every year. And you know what? I don't know. I think it's just me. I'm going to say Julius Randle makes a second straight all-star game, thus bucking the years that start in odd numbers curse that he has with the Knicks. So he's going to make a second straight all-star game, his third overall for his career, but he will not get an All-NBA nod this year. Instead, Jalen Brunson will get both an all-star and an all-NBA nod this year, which is a lot of gold going around the Knicks.
Alex, hold on. Make sure. Hold on. Carry the one. Do you think the Knicks are going to have 2 all-stars?
2 all-stars.
Wow.
That is crazy stuff, right?
Yeah, it was so crazy. It blew up your camera, Alex.
Apparently, I don't know what just happened there. I
blew it
Like,
right
is
out.
that a
I
special
thought
effect?
you intentionally
This
had
all-
balloons go up to celebrate the 2 All-Stars.
that was like
This all has to stay in.
we're
Yeah,
just
that's our
leaving that
classic
in.
effect here on Locked On Knicks. We do that whenever anyone makes a bold point.
Excellent job, Alex. Truly.
I have no idea what just happened. My camera's back now, so we're leaving that in. For those that aren't watching on YouTube, you just missed a great moment.
Missing
when my
out.
camera bugged out for no reason. Anyway, the take's so spicy that it destroyed my camera. John, what do you think about that?
I don't. Well, it's not crazy, right? It's not crazy. We I think all agree that there is a world where the Knicks could be, a top 4 team, right? Certainly. I referenced it on a recent pod that nearly 1 out of 5 general managers in the NBA picked the Knicks to finish 3rd in the East, which is a pretty nice compliment. Like when you have teams that are in that upper echelon of the league, almost regardless of conference, most of them, I would say, right? Most teams that are on, maybe not most teams, half, a little bit more than half of teams that are like on a 50-win pace or more will get could get a couple of All-Stars. Not crazy. I guess my pushback is probably the obvious one, which is that if the Knicks succeed this season, I think it will be certainly the guys at the top will matter a lot, but I think it's going to be looked at as like, man, they really built a capital T team there in New York, and it's like everybody has their hands in it, as opposed to it's like, oh, it's KD and Russ and the rest of the Thunder. I don't know why that example is the one that came to my head. There are other ones that are more obvious, but like something like that of that ilk. You know what I mean? It's bold.
Yeah. I mean, I could see that. It would be akin to like, if Dame and Giannis both make it, you understand, because it's like Dame and Giannis. Well, Dame and Giannis and Middleton, but I mean, they got a pretty solid team. But like, you look at that and you say, oh, those are 2 like capital S superstars that with tenure in the NBA, with tenure in All-Star games and everything else that make you look at that. But Brunson is sort of the wild card, I think, to me. He's gonna have to really do enough to like break through that wall, and Randle is gonna have to do enough to justify an All-Star season still too, I think, which is part of it.
Interesting. I see Randle as more of the wild card, but that's just me. I'm curious what these other guys think.
Yeah, I will hold off my thoughts on Brunson because I take it a step further, even Alex. So I'm fair to say that I'm with you, and I think I'll go so far as to say I think it would be a disappointment if he doesn't make the All-Star team this year, and there aren't injury reasons. Just going through the East roster from last year, Kyrie Irving made it. He will not be back. I have a feeling between Drew Holiday and Jalen Brown, I would be pretty surprised if, in addition to Jason Tatum, they both made it. So that should open up a spot. Pascal Siakam, I mean, who knows what's going on there with how chaotic things are in Toronto. He should still put up really good numbers. I don't think DeMar DeRozan will be back. Donovan Mitchell should be there. Halliburton should be there. Tatum, Giannis, Embiid obviously will all likely make it. I think there's certainly a window for both of them. If you asked me to guess, I think Brunson makes it. I think Randle doesn't. I don't know why. I think Randle's going to take a small step back statistically this year. Obviously, someone like Mikal Bridges is a candidate. Zach LaVine with a good season, a candidate. I kind of think Cade Cunningham is going to ultimately find his way onto the team. Maybe one of the Orlando guys. Maybe Trae Young has a bounce back season. I think it is pretty bold because I think even last year the field was really crowded and Randle kind of just made it by the skin of his teeth. So I'm going to say Brunson makes it, Randle doesn't, but I could certainly see a world where both of them are on there. But Jeremy, what do you think about all that?
I agree with that, Gavin. I think it's only going to be one, and especially if James Harden, who was named over Brunson in terms of a replacement,
right,
will not be there. There's another, one fewer, and there will be some, Tyrese Halliburton type move. Maybe there's a correction. There's going to be an injury in there. I feel more confident about Brunson, especially because I think there's another gear there with Brunson, especially as the Knicks are saying, where, hey, yeah, it's perfect for us to be able to move this player who can just take a whole bunch of spot up threes and enhance his game further. Whereas Randle, it's like, what's the next gear that really gets him there? Is it really just as easy as watching film? Because I think that will help, but I don't think that's what will get him from point A to point B. But for Brunson, there's more wiggle room.
Let me ask you guys this. So there was once a year, the year was 2014-15, where Jeff Teague, Paul Millsap, Kyle Korver, and Al Horford all from one team made the All-Star team, strictly because the team, nobody would argue, I think, that those guys were necessarily all by themselves worthy of being All-Stars, but because the team was so good, it was kind of like, well, we'd be fools not to include this many All-Stars from this team. Now, granted, that was a much weaker East too, so it's a very different landscape there.
And they were, if I recall, very far ahead of the pack.
Yes,
for most of the year.
Wound up being a 60-win team, but that of course, that of course wound up giving them four All-Stars as the number one seed. What is the threshold where you think that people might say the Knicks are so good right now, and Julius Randle and Jalen Brunson are both averaging like 23 to 25 points per game? Like, they're really good. Would the Knicks need to be like the 3 seed around the All-Star break for this to happen, you think, for two All-Stars?
Top 4 minimum, I would say.
Yeah.
I think the problem is if you just look at the other teams at the top of the East, so many of them have likely duos and possible trios. Like you mentioned, Milwaukee and maybe Middleton, right? Boston with their 2 guys who are basically shoo-ins at this point. Plus, maybe, you could pick. You could pick probably 2 or 3 different possible third Celtics, right? So you got them. Philly, whether it's Maxey or Harden, Cleveland with Mitchell and pick your next guy there. Miami with Jimmy and Bam. Like, that's I even mentioned Atlanta. Like, what if Atlanta's the 4th or 5th seed around the All-Star break, right? Is it Trey and maybe DeJounte Murray gets? I don't really see that likely happening, but like, there's a lot of teams where it could be 2 guys that are I would guess are gonna have gaudier stats, but we could be wrong about that.
All right, we'll be right back in with John and Jeremy and a fuego take from Gavin, so hot that it set off all the alarms around his apartment during it, about Jalen Brunson potentially being in the MVP race this coming year. Quite the fuego take. But first, I have to remind you all that today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks. And you've heard us talk about PrizePicks before. It's the best daily fantasy game out there, because it's not like those other daily fantasy games that make you, compete against a bunch of people, whales, as they call them, that place a ton of bets in these daily fantasy games, have algorithms that tell them exactly what to do. So then they win like 500 out of 1,000 slots in the contest, and then you don't even get anything out of it. And it's like flushing your money down the toilet. Luckily, PrizePicks is just you versus the projections available, and you just pick over-unders for multiple players in multiple sports if you want to, and potentially win big. For just to sing its praises a little bit, it's the most fun I've had, winning up to 25 times my money this football season. You just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projected stats, and place your entry. And testing my skills on PrizePicks this football season is the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. If you have the skills, you could turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. And the same applies to basketball, quite frankly, because it's easy to place a multi-leg daily fantasy entry when there's so many different stats in basketball. And with the PrizePicks reboot policy, your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For NFL games and college football top 25 matchups, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return the second, that player is rebooted. PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with injury insurance. Very important. So go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, it's daily fantasy sports made easy. Gavin, I think it's time for prediction 2.
Got it. All right. So I threw out on the KFS pod, which again, people can go check out on their feed, Joel Embiid to the Knicks next year. I think this is probably a bolder prediction. So I'm going to say a top 5 MVP finish for Jalen Brunson. And the NBA has maybe you could make an argument, but probably has never been as talented as it is now. That is going to be extremely hard for a guy who, as Alex, you just noted, not only was not All NBA last year, was not an All-Star last year, and a lot of people would not have as even a top 5 player at his position in the NBA. But I'll make the case. Over the last 40 games, including the playoffs, Brunson put up 27 points, 6 assists, 4 rebounds on 50, 40, 83 shooting. In the playoffs, he even elevated that a step further. It was 28, 5.5, 5. Shot it exceptionally well. Kind of the definition of MVP, led the entire NBA in on-off differential in the playoffs. And I think there's still room to grow there. We actually had the Athletics, Fred Katz. I know he wrote it on Twitter and possibly in an article. And I know, John, I think he said it to you on a podcast. There's a thought within the Knicks as the alarms go off because this take is just too hot, that Jalen Brunson has not maxed out as a player yet. And I think the number that I go to when I say, all right, where does he make a substantial leap is in his three-pointer attempts. He took just 4.7 last year while shooting just under 42%. Wow, this is a really hot take. You compare that to the rest of the NBA. Maybe I have to stop. Maybe it's too hot.
No,
you compare that to
fire department's begging you.
This is really good. You compare that to stars around the league. Luka. So Brunson took 4.7 threes per game. Luka took 8. Dame took 11. Tatum took 9. Mitchell took 9. Kyrie took 8. Lowry Markkanen took 8. Our own Julius Randle took 8 last year. I don't see any reason why Jalen Brunson should not be getting up 8 threes per game. Granted, he doesn't have the 4-point range as some of those guys. He's a little bit smaller, doesn't have the quickest release in the world, but he was 17th percentile in the entire NBA amongst point guard in 3-point attempts. You double up his 3-point attempts, he could average pretty close to 30 points per game this year, which he did again for an entire half year. I think the other thing I'm looking at there is around the rest of the NBA. There are just so many conglomerates of star talent on some of the top teams. I think you're going to see guys cannibalize votes from each other, whether it's Dame and Giannis, whether it's Jason Tatum and the entire team around him, whether it's Nikola Jokic fatigue, Steph Curry not playing enough games. Granted, there's so many guys on the up and up, but I think Brunson has a window there as someone who could be on one of the elite teams in the NBA while also kind of being the clear-cut alpha dog and no one else, Julius Randle's side, really cutting into that. Now, for this to happen, I think the Knicks are going to have to be a top 2 seed in the Eastern Conference. And that's probably my biggest question here because I don't think that's going to happen. But I think there's a world where that happens with their continuity, with their depth, and they just get off to an incredible start of the year and kind of hold on for dear life and upset a few teams that are maybe a little bit more injury prone and get to that spot, and Jalen Brunson gets rewarded for it.
Man, I wonder if they would actually need to be the 1 seed. If they, or maybe not the 1 seed, but like one of the top 2 seeds where there was a little bit of separation between them and like whoever was the 3 seed. I think this is really bold. If only because the competition, like you mentioned, like Jokic fatigue. Jokic fatigue might lead to Jokic not winning it, but like I can't even imagine how many games Jokic would have to miss to. Well, I guess. Well, now hold on. Someone remind me of the new rules. If you don't play 65 games, you can't be All NBA, but you still get votes for MVP if you don't play 65 games. I think so too, right? So if that barometer isn't there, that's to me what makes it tough, right? Because last season Steph Curry played in 59 games, right? For a Warriors team that was like, they were pretty good. And he still got more votes for MVP than Jalen Brunson. So it's just like there are years where a guy can sneak in there, like Joakim Noah finished 4th, I think, the 1 year. I mean, we had the Isaiah Thomas year, the more recent Isaiah Thomas. I think there was a Peja Stojakovic 4th place finish.
Wait, Griffin, Paul George got top 4. I think both of them did.
Yeah, I mean that's the less ridiculous for me because those guys at times were like all NBA first to second team level players. But like, I think here's the thing: I think Brunson's going to do this at some point in his career, finish top 5 in MVP. I don't know if it's going to be this year, just because the competition right now. I just think it's brutal.
What about as an analogous player / situation, if the Knicks can replicate what the 2012-13 Knicks did and become a top 2 seed? Carmelo Anthony was what, 3rd in MVP voting that year?
He was 3rd, but he was the undoubted guy, right?
Right. Yeah,
I think there would have to be that statistical. Like it would have to be Brunson putting up 29, Randle scoring 22, which I think that's kind of what I'm predicting here.
Not completely unreasonable.
I I'd be really surprised if that I just don't see Brunson getting. If anything, Brunson takes a step back scoring wise, and maybe dishes a little bit more. Maybe that's nuts, but if anything, that's what I could see happening. But you might be right.
I can maybe just see it out of a way of preservation, but if like just preserving him and his energy throughout the course of a whole season and saying, well, we have the firepower to supplement you well enough, so why don't we? But I think if they just fully let him loose like they did in the playoffs and say, do whatever the heck you want, score as many points you want. Tibbs clearly loves to just let him cook.
Yeah.
And if they say that's what we want our identity to be this year, I could see a world where they say, you know what, dude, like, go get yours. Go get your moment. Like, go take what you want, because you wanted to be an all-star last year and you had a great season and they still didn't give it to you. And you wanted to be all NBA last year and you had a great season and they still didn't give it to you. So you know what? If you feel physically able and capable and want to go out there and score 30 points per game and take that burden on, go for it. Now, I know that Brunson wouldn't do that to the effect of making his teammates pissed or something, you know, like he wouldn't go out there and be taking so many shots that that RJ Barrett is getting, you know, angry visibly, and, you know, Julius Randle is getting pouty and whatever. So maybe that's the thing that ultimately holds back and why he'll just be being the leader that he is. He would never soak up that amount of shots and usage.
Yeah.
But I could see a world where if the Knicks say to him, like if Tibbs says to him and the rest of the coaching staff and you know, Leon Rose and all those guys say to him, like, go for it, dude. Go score 30 points a game, where he'd be like, maybe. Like, I could do that.
Yeah, I think the needle to be threaded there is trading a bunch of 2s for 3s, which we'd have to see if he's able to do.
Yeah,
Jeremy, where are you at on it?
In terms of top 5 finish for Brunson?
Yeah.
A little overconfident.
Yeah, it's bold to me. And again, I can't sit here and say, well, listen, it's not going to happen for shorter guards, right? Because we've seen Chris Paul finish near that. In fact, I think one season he even did finish there. Yeah. And Donovan Mitchell was 6th last season. So it's just, I don't think he will be selfish enough to get that. And I don't mean that as like Chris Paul is selfish or Donovan Mitchell. It's just like, I think he would really need to work for it to be able to get into that position, more to the point where he doesn't want it to be the detriment of the team. I think he'd be more willing to have the less is more conversation, still get the All-Star and be in conversation for All-NBA, but top 5 would just be quite the leap that certainly we would all be here for, but it just might be a little too much.
Yeah, he's not the distributor Steve Nash or Chris Paul is, like not even like 2 or 3 tiers down from that. And to me, that's where my most hesitancy comes in. Like, it has to be him putting up basically 30 points per game for a Knicks team that wins something like 55 games, which is a lot, but it's bold predictions. Jeremy, you want to keep us going? What's your next one?
Is it me or John? Or John, do you want to?
If we're keeping the same order, I think it's me. I'll just say real quickly on Brunson, possible top 5 MVP. There have been 5 guys in the history of this franchise that have finished top 5 in MVP. 4 of them are among the 75 greatest players ever, and the 5th one, Bernard King, should have been. So if Brunson does this, man, that's, boy, we could start having a conversation. All right, I feel bad because I feel like this takes have been getting spicier and spicier, and mine is going to be. I went not chalk with this one because it's a hot take. Because well, I'll say why it's a hot take in a second, but it's more of a ground in stats type of thing. So let's see, their history since, or not their history, for the last 20 years, which is how long Cleaning the Glass has been recording this stuff. The Knicks have only led the league in a 4 factors category, I think 3 or 4 times. They led the league in turnover percentage one year. They led it in offensive rebounding percentage one year. And way back when, in the early part of the decade, they led the league in free throw rate. My third bold prediction is that the Knicks will finish 1st in the league in free throw rate this year. So again, context, we always like to add context. They finished 2nd in this category 2 years ago to Philadelphia, but there's an asterisk to that because Philly was at 23.3% of free throw rate. The Knicks in second were at 20.9, and the gap between Philly and New York was the same as the gap between New York and like the 20th place team or 19th place team. So there was a ways to go. Last season, in an interesting quirk, the Knicks actually increased their free throw rate from 20.9 to 21.8, but they finished 10th when they had finished second the year before, and that's because across the league, free throws went up considerably. Philly, again, had the lead by a considerable degree, 2 points, 25.1. Second place was Portland, 23.1. I just think they're going to make improvements here across the board. I think Jalen Brunson, the aforementioned Jalen Brunson, his free throws per 36 minutes over the course of his career had been pretty steady in Dallas, 2.7, 2.6, 3.2, 3.0. Last season got up to 5.9. I think he can make another leap here. I think he could get up above 7 free throws per 36 minutes. I think RJ Barrett, I'm drinking the Kool-Aid from the first couple of preseason games. I think he finally puts together a season where he could get up over 7 free throw attempts per 36 minutes. I think we've seen Julius Randle have bigger free throw seasons. And then just all the way down the line, Emmanuel Quickley, Quentin Grimes. I think this team is going to lean into its strength, which is attacking the paint. That's what they want to do. I mean, clearly they want to shoot threes too, but like we know what they do. They know where their bread is buttered. And yeah, I think they're going to shoot more free throws again on a ratio basis in comparison to the amount of shots they take than any team in the league. So I don't know how spicy that is.
I could see it because we have I'm mostly, I mean, so I could see it with Brunson first off, but more so I could see it with RJ. I mean, I think he's just finding a new, not even just a new gear, but a new level of respect with officials.
Yeah.
Where
and using his body, I think in a
yeah.
To me, it's like we see it right when RJ is really being physical, right? And I think he's been that way so far the preseason.
So I think that he's going to by himself buoy that number a good amount. But then I also think that the team in general, and this will relate to the second unit a lot, I think, which the second unit has come up a lot, predictably in this 2-part or 4-parter episode so far. But I think the second unit is going to draw a lot of fouls by virtue of playing faster. And if you put yourself in a situation where you're in transition a lot, you're going to put yourself in a situation where people are going to foul you to try to prevent an easy layup a lot more. I think that that's going to create more scenarios for the Knicks to hit the free throw line. Now, the big thing is going to be, as a team, can they become better free throw shooters? Because as a team, they've been pretty dreadful at that. Even Brunson went through a really head-scratching stretch last year where he just couldn't seem to make it, even though he was super efficient for most of the year. He had overall, a small stretch. Yeah, he had a small stretch where he couldn't quite do it. Quickly, even, for as dead eye as he is, went through a couple little stretches where he would miss like an inordinate amount of free throws. So it's going to be on the Knicks to keep that consistency up all year. But I do think that they have a team that's designed to get to the line more. And that comes right down to two. Even in that second unit, Josh Hart is going to, I have my thoughts. And again, I still didn't make this a bold take here because I've been saying it so much just on our show to begin with. But I think that he's going to struggle a bit to be as dominant of a rebounding presence as he normally is if he's playing a lot of minutes as the big man in the lineup rather than the small man that can snatch the ball out of the big man's hands. But I think from an offensive perspective, being matched up against bigger players on the other side of things is going to help him because he's going to be able to just, they'll have to respect him to a degree at the perimeter. But if they don't, I think that he's crafty enough to get in there and draw fouls and, get past these guys. Off of a quick closeout or whatever, or even just off a pump fake to kind of get them off their feet a bit. And that he's going to see an uptick in free throw attempts as well. So I could definitely see that happening. But Jeremy, where are you at on that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's the Knicks have a lot of players who can drive. I think even someone like Quentin Grimes, the ability where he'll make do of something when given the chance. The coaching staff has said, try to work more into it, be a little bit more creative. So yeah, I mean, they could feasibly get there. But to Alex, your point, yes, getting to the rim is absolutely a strength, but the connecting part how are you going to improve there? Because is it better to relentlessly drive and try to look for collecting a foul, or is it getting the ball at the corner, hitting corner threes, more drive and kick, which could also turn into potentially more charging calls, but even still, just like focusing on finding the open man consistently, especially if that player is on the corner. And I wonder if that desire will get in the way of that number of free throws that we're talking about.
Yeah, I
Possibly.
think to your point, like I'm curious, like if they become a better passing team this year, and kind of like we saw in the second preseason game, seek out more early offense. Does that help or hurt this? Because they're going to get more open threes, but you're also much more likely to get fouled in the first like 7 or 8 seconds of the shot clock than the last 7 or 8 seconds of the shot clock, generally, because you're getting higher quality shots. The defense is a little bit less settled. They're more likely to be out of position. I think RJ Barrett, just to echo everything you guys said, him just being in shape to start this year makes a pretty substantial difference in this category. With everything we're talking about, we have to remember that the first 20 games of last year were a wash in some way, like not only with some of the guys in the rotation, but with how poorly Julius was playing, with RJ looking like borderline did not belong in an NBA rotation. Like that will just having competency throughout a whole season will elevate all of these statistics so much. And to John's point, the team that's been reigning over this stat, Philadelphia, if they lose James Harden, they're going to drop down quite a bit. So yep. I could certainly see. I think it's a really good one.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that moves us, unless anybody had any further rebuttals, I think that moves us to Jeremy and your final bold prediction. First, give me a grade on John's last prediction there. What do you think on the Scoville scale? Where are we sitting? Because you said in the first part that maybe last year's takes from him were not spicy enough. I'm curious if you think that he's he's seasoned his takes well enough this year.
A little bit, yeah. I thought the first two were definitely spicier. This is a little bit more, but you need to end on something that's not red hot, right?
This isn't a last
milk
to wash
it down. Palate cleanser.
Exactly.
No, this is a habanero, which you could eat a habanero, by itself. It's not pleasant, but you can do it.
All right, that's it for this episode. But good news, there's another episode in your feed already where you can check out part 4 of this. Also, we neglected to mention, but you can check out parts 1 and 2 on the Knicks Film School feed too, if you want even more of this great bold prediction action. So definitely check it out, like right now. What are you waiting for? Go to part 4 and see how this whole thing ends, including some Mitch Defensive Player of the Year consideration, which is pretty spicy, if I do say so myself. But check that out right now on Locked On Knicks.